for me, but with it comes responsibility. Because you see, when you're in charge and something goes wrong, guess who's responsible? But now what do you do when that happens? Well, you didn't follow the rules. You didn't follow the script. If you'd have done what I told you to, like I told you to do it, how often I told you to do it, this wouldn't have happened. You see, I never could take responsibility. I wanted it both ways. It's called having your cake and eat it too. And not having God in the center of my relationships would tell you that I didn't have many relationships, and I didn't have any quality relationships either. People came in my life, and when the control became so great, they had to go away. They had to leave me. And I hated being abandoned. It reminded me, Daddy left me. You know, I'm 12 years old. I watched my daddy die of a heart attack. My daddy left. How could Daddy do that? And so all my life then, people come into my life, don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. But what am I doing? I'm pushing you away with my behavior all the time. It's one of those, come here, go away. You know, it's amazing how we'll do that. It says right here, though, we've got to have an informed family conscience. What is that? That's when everybody in the family has a say. Everybody brings to the table what they know. When you have something you need to talk about, everybody knows something. Nobody knows it all. Gather together. That's why we have brainstorming sessions at work. Everybody sits around and brings their area of expertise to the table. And then you arrive at a plan of action with all the facts that you have available to you. That's what you do. That's what an informed family conscience is. And see, the thing about it is, what happens in this? Well, in my house, there's two of us. We both bring the dogs. I mean, the dogs are there, but they don't contribute much to the conversation, you know. But believe me, what goes in that house does affect the animals. If you want to see how the animals, what's going on in the house, watch the animals in the house. When JD and I would be fussing and fighting with one another, the dogs would be snippy at one another. Or they would go off and sulk somewhere, or they would hide because they knew war was about to break out. You know, I can remember it was real easy when JD was out drinking and I would be pacing the floor waiting on him to come home. The dogs would be following me. You know, they're just going right behind me. And I turn quick and I step on them and I trip and I kick them and I say, get the hell out of me. Can't you see I'm busy? I'm worrying. Get away. Let me worry. Don't you see, if that had been a child, it would have been all the same? I've sponsored people that talk about the guilt that they have for mistreating their children because they were so upset about worrying about what somebody else was doing, then they neglect the needs of their children. And I was doing that with my little children that God had entrusted to me, the little dogs, that all they wanted to do was love me and give me comfort and just get the hell away from me. And so when the alcoholic would come in, they wanted to love him. That really pissed me off. He doesn't deserve love. Biting, you know. No, they go over there and love him. They just loved him. They accepted him just the way he was. They were trying to show me how to love him. Did you ever think about dog? Is God spelled backwards? You know, God's trying to show me. There's nothing gives unconditional love better than a dog. You ain't getting that from a cat, I can tell you. You know, dogs have loved ones. Cats have staff, you know. There's a whole different approach to that, you know. But the bottom line is that, you know, you've got to have all of this working together in the house to make these decisions. And so when everybody brings it, so now we pray about it. You come up with your course of action. Well, you see, if you brought God into that discussion, into that informed family conscience, then you take a course of action and it's nobody's fault if it doesn't go the way you think it would have, because you prayed about it. You know, and you've got to remember, sometimes the wrong decision is the right decision. It's what you learn from. You know, I never learned anything from my successes. You learn from your failures. You learn what doesn't work. It's a process of elimination. And how many times do you have to do it wrong before you learn it doesn't work? Many, many times. You know, you won't get it on the first try. I've never known anybody get it on first try. That would really irritate me if they did. You have to do it a few times before you realize, oh, this doesn't work. That's the reason our foreheads are flat, from hitting doors, It's a shut door, And when something goes wrong, you can't blame one another for a bad decision, because God was in the decision and you all agreed. And sometimes when we come back and we pray about it and we can't reach a decision, we go back and we pray some more. And God then will show us something that we didn't know before, give you more information. God will show you another option that you didn't even see in the beginning, or you'll find that you can negotiate. You can give in a little, he can give in a little. Instead of trying to hold your ground to the bitter end. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's a choice. And sometimes being right doesn't necessarily make you happy, especially when it damages the relationship. And you got to remember, that God has lots of answers. I remember my mother, when I'd go to her and ask her a question like, can I go down to Shirley's? And she'd say, oh, let me think about it. And I'd say, what's to think about it, for God's sake? I go down to Shirley's? And she'd say, well, no. Oh, I'll give you time to think about it. If you got to know right now, the answer's no. Because you have to have time to think and to pray about the major decisions of your life. JD, the way we made decisions was, JD wanted a sports car. Teenager, I want a station wagon. Oh, fuddy-duddy. I want a sports car. I want a station wagon. Let's buy a truck. Nobody wants that. That's what we did. We bought a truck. Nobody wanted the truck. It was the only thing we could agree on, because neither one of us was going to give in a bit. I hated the truck, Today what we do is we'll say, let's pray about something. And then after you pray about it and you don't have a definitive answer, we'll say, God, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Bless it or block it. I'm okay either way. Bless it or block it. And God will shut the doors. It's like there's answers to all prayers. I used to think it was just, if it's what I want, the answer's no. But God says yes. God says no. God says not right now. God says you got to be shitting me. This is the way my God talks to me. And then there's the other one, I have a better plan. A lot of times God has a better plan. You think you have to have it. At one point in time, JD and I decided there was this house in Jacksonville that we wanted, and and the man and his wife could never agree. When he was ready to sell, she wasn't ready to sell. When she was ready to sell, he wouldn't sell because she wasn't ready the last time he was ready. And they go back and forth. Must have been untreated people there. And so finally, we just gave up on that house and we went and bought elsewhere, where we are today. And the amazing thing is, I told JD, I said, we are so fortunate we didn't buy that house. They built a daycare center next door. Oh, God. I said, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for no. Thank you, God, that they could never get together, because we would have bought the house, My mother used to say to me, can't you make JD do so-and-so? Now, that statement, can't you make him do that? What does that imply? You ought to be able to. So now you redouble your efforts, which causes hell in our home, because I'm going to try to make him do what my mother... And why am I doing that? Because I want him to do it? No, because I'm trying to get my mother's approval. We had another situation, JD and my sister. They were having communication problems. And so I was the interpreter. Well, Dorothy, what he really meant when he said this was, and I would tell her, and then I would say, now, JD, what Dorothy meant was, and I would tell him what she meant, and I'm right there in the middle, and I'm always on pins and needles, afraid of what one's going to say or the other one's going to say, and they're going to have World War III right there in the living room. And my sponsor said, get out of that. I said, what do you mean, if I get out of it? And she said, let them have World War III. It's their deal. It's their relationship. You get out of it. They can't have a relationship. You're too busy meddling back and forth trying to fix everything. So I got out of it. Next time we were over at Mother's for a family dinner, He said something, she said something, and World War III happened right there at Mama's. And Dorothy got mad and left and went home, and I'm there going, oh my God. And I got home and I called my sponsor and I said, this happened. She said, well, good. Now maybe they can clear the air and it's over. And in a few weeks, when we'd be together over at Mama's, they weren't bickering at each other and this kind of thing. And lo and behold, who became best friends? J.D. and Dorothy. J.D. and Dorothy became best friends. That would never happen as long as I'm there shuffling, I'm the kind that has to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, I'm just right there doing these things. Another thing that we do in our home is called courtesy. Have you ever noticed how you will treat a complete stranger better than you do someone in your own home? Treat them better. We've learned to say yes, please, thank you. We use, these are terms that we don't think about. We do them automatically now. But in the beginning, we had to make ourselves, all this stuff, it's practice. Practice, practice, practice. It's like when you go to school, you don't learn the alphabet the first day you're there. You have to keep going over and over and over. And so we had to do that. We used to fight over control at home. When we bought a television, we bought 2 remote controls. Can you see where this is going to cause a problem? He'd be on one side of the room. I'd be on the other. He'd beep, 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 beep. Do I have to tell you nobody got to see anything? So then we got the calendar down. Monday's yours, Tuesday's mine, Wednesday's yours this week. Then we do the next. So we had the calendar done for a year. And we would check the calendar to see whose night was have control over the television. But now, wait a minute. There's a program I really wanted to see, a special that's on his night. Oh, God, what am I going to do? Well, I'll negotiate. I'll give him 2 of my programs over here for that one. Man, this really got complicated. And finally, we just said, how important is that? Turn off the damn television. And when we turned off the television and started sitting down and talking with one another, we found that was a lot more productive than fighting over a darn TV program, And now, how important is it? If he wants to see something I don't care for, I can read. It doesn't matter. And he reads too, He can read something while I'm watching something I like. And it doesn't matter. But the things that we made such big deals for such a long time, it just really doesn't matter. The thing about it is, though, I will say, men amaze me with a remote control. Now, the man who cannot decide where he wants to eat for supper, because you can say, honey, you want to go out and eat? He'll say, yeah, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Well, I don't care. Well, you've got to say. Why have I got to say? Well, because what if I pick something and you don't like it? Well, I'll tell you I don't like it. You just can't just say, well, I want to go so-and-so. You know what I'm talking about, ladies. This same person can decide in a 32nd of a second what's on TV. I'm sure there's Clickers Anonymous. It's always amazing to me. And then we had driving problems, When he drove, it drove me crazy. JD doesn't like to drive in heavy traffic. I don't like to ride with him in the car with heavy traffic either, because he's scared. He says it bothers him. He's no country boy. He said, I'm just not used to this. He said, it drives me crazy. And so we have an agreement that when I'm driving, he keeps his mouth shut. When he's driving, I keep my mouth shut. And if you can't, then don't get in the car. Because when somebody is picking at you about your driving, it makes you worse than you were before they started picking at you about your driving. Now, I have my shortcomings about driving. I love to drive, and I love to drive very, very fast, but I like to do it forward. I'm not a good backer-upper. I've always envied people who could look over their shoulder and go 70 miles an hour for a block in reverse. I think, God, if I could just do that, But I can't. I have my limitations. But I tell you what, there's a lot of strange things that happen on the road. The other day, I got rear-ended. And this young boy, he was 18 years old. I had come to a complete stop and had been there for at least 6 or 7 seconds when all of a sudden, wham, And you go, my God, what was that, And he jumps out of his car. He comes tearing up to the side of my window, and he said, "Why did you stop?" Why didn't you stop? The traffic was stopped. That's why I stopped. Why didn't you stop? He said, "Well, I was talking on my cell phone with this hand, and I was adjusting my radio, and when I looked up, and I said, 'And what were you driving with, your dick?'" And you know, it's like you'd think, after all these years, you wouldn't say things like that, because there's nothing worse than having to make an amends to an asshole. Fortunately, the police took him away. Don't attack me when you've just hit me. But you see, what we saw here was, he was scared. He's 18 years old. He sees his whole driving life going away. He knows his insurance rate that's already over the top is going to be beyond anything. How could I dare be stopped in front of him when he wasn't paying attention? You know, those kind of things. I found, too, that there's another way to be courteous, and that is, I had a bad habit of interrupting J.D. I would think I knew what he was going to say, and he'd start and I'd finish his sentences for him. My sister did that to me for years. I hated it. I never realized the things that I did that I hated most when other people did them to me were the things I had been doing to them. You know, it's amazing. You always hate the things in you that you can't stand the most when you see them in somebody else. You know, it's like taking inventory. First inventory I ever took was that of my grand sponsor. I didn't like her. We'd go to the meetings, and I had this little piece of paper, and it was called Things I Hate About Ethel. I didn't mention this to my sponsor. It didn't seem important at the time. And every meeting I'd come back, and I'd add another thing to my list. And J.D. caught me one night when we was going to a meeting, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm checking over my list so I don't duplicate anything." I said, "These are things I hate about Ethel." And he says, "Well, in AA," now you know you're not going to like it already, don't you? In AA, they tell us that there's good in the worst of us and there's bad in the best of us. Well, whoopee-doo for AA. So now he's challenged me. He said, have you ever looked for anything good in Ethel?" I said, "No, there's nothing good about Ethel." So now I've got to go to the meeting, and I've got to look for something about Ethel. And she's talking about how she deals with anger, and she's talking about she repots plants when she's angry. And she gets down in the soil, and she kills her husband, and she just buries him down in the... And so I went home that night, and I turned my paper over, and I said, "Things I like about Ethel." Ethel likes plants. But it was the beginning, and then I began to focus differently, and I began to look, and then after a few months, I'm checking both sides of my piece of paper, and I told J.D., I said, "I know why I don't like Ethel." And he said, "Why is that?" And I said, "I think we're just alike." So anytime, you know, if you want to take your inventory and you don't know how, take someone else's, and then mark their name off the top and put yours in. It'll be pretty darn close. Tradition 3, 2 or more persons when gathered together for mutual benefit may call themselves a relationship. The only basic requirements for a good marriage or relationship are a mutual desire to be in the relationship and a willingness to make it work. One person can't make a relationship work. Haven't you tried it? You got to have a little cooperation there, both of them. Both people have to want it. Both people have to work at it. But you're going to grow at different rates. You can't compare your progress against somebody else's. You compare your progress how you were last week, last month, those kind of things. You have to compare it against your own. And I've had the desire many times to do something, but I'm lazy about following through. You know, it's like saying, well, I'm going to go to Tampa. Chances are I'm not going to get to Tampa if I don't get out and get in the car and head toward Tampa. If I can sit in here all day and say, I think I need to go to Tampa, but nothing's happening till something happens. Now, why have you stayed in a relationship? Why have you stayed in a bad relationship? Well, I felt trapped. I had a lot of fear, emotional insecurity, financial insecurity. With my first husband, I was in the he was in the military, and we got that guaranteed money coming in. Then the confusion. I don't know what to do. I don't have a better deal. So you stay where you are if you don't have a better deal. Or you don't know really what you want. There's some things you like about it. There's other things you hate about it. You don't know how to bring that together. Then with me, I didn't want to get divorced because then I'd have to split the assets. It's all my stuff. I'm very materialistic. I don't want to give up my stuff. So I'll stay for my stuff. My stuff doesn't keep me warm, but I'm going to stay for my stuff. Then there's pity, not love. You feel sorry for somebody, and you call it love. I felt sorry for him. He needed me. He needed someone. When I met my first husband, we got together because my daddy had died when I was 12. His mother had died when she was 12. And we had both lost a parent, and we both could relate to that needing of closeness. And we thought that would hold us together. It didn't hold us together. You got to have more than just having mutual experience. That's just like in your group, you got mutual experience, but if you don't have traditions and you hold to them, all your mutual experience, your group will crack out. Because you'll get into stuff that you won't be able to deal with if you can't learn how to disagree agreeably and those kind of things that I never knew how to do before I got here, that I could let you have a different opinion than mine and it'd be okay for us to have a different opinion. You can agree to have different opinion. It's not the end of the world. So you don't agree on that issue. Do you agree on more issues than you don't agree on? But you see, we take one thing and blow it great big, And then pride. I don't want to admit I made a mistake. When I got married, my mother said, "You shouldn't marry him." Well, I had to marry him then. She said, "I don't like him." That's all right. She learned to love him. She hated me. She learned to love him. And when I told her I was going to get a divorce, she's going, "Why? He's such a nice young man." I could tell you volumes of why, Mama. But what's the point? What's the point? I'm the one that's having to live there. And then you get to looking for the new relationship. Now, isn't that one great? You describe your new found love to everybody. He's fantastic. He's wonderful. He's sweet. He's kind. He's so generous. He's this. He's that. You see his potential. Save me from people with potential. Now you get the little piece of paper and you're married. Let's change him. I'm going to make him gentler, kinder. I'm going to make him better, one of those things. Instead of realizing, why did you marry that person in the first place? You don't marry somebody to try to change them to be the way you want them to be. Because let me tell you, anything they do that irritates you while you're dating is really going to get on your last nerve when you got it on a daily basis, Those kind of things. Because they're not going to change. JD said to me, "You sold me a bad bill of goods." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you never said anything about all these things that I do that evidently drive you crazy." I said, "Well, hell, we were dating." He said, "So I married somebody that I don't have." That's about the size of it, because I thought I could get him to change. And see, then there was my mother's big encouragement. "You made your bed, now you lie in it." So I stayed in that thing. And sometimes it's easier to stay with the known, no matter how bad it is, than to jump out into the unknown. But I'll tell you, when the fear of knowing it's never going to be any better than what it is now becomes greater than that fear of the unknown, you'll take that chance. It's like anything's got to be up from here. I don't give a damn what it is. And to me, sometimes I have to be backed into that point before I'm willing to do something different. There's a lot of things that kill relationships. Fear and dishonesty are two big ones, especially when you're dishonest about your feelings. And then I have these obsessions that come across me, I don't know. I've been an obsessive compulsive person since I was a little bitty kid. We had 10 acres. And we had lots of fruit trees on those 10 acres. And right outside the back door, we had this big pear tree. Now, the next door neighbor, Mr. Lyons, had a pear tree in his backyard, but he had a fence. And he had a little dog that would bite you inside that fence. His pears looked better to me. So the challenge was to see if I could run, open that gate, get over there and get that pear, get out and go on the other side before I got dog bit. Those stolen pears tasted better than the pears in my own backyard. Same variety of pear tree, same everything. It just wasn't as exciting to go out the door and pick a pear. But when you get the challenge over here, and back in those days, they would put the dog up for 10 days when they'd bite you. And he had done it so many times, he suggested Mother put me up for 10 days. He said, "What is with her?" And I'm going, "You just don't understand." He said, "No, I don't understand. You got pears in your own back door." I said, "You can have them all. I just want those over there." And, when his tree died, I cried. It was just awful. And that same obsession was going to follow me. And I found that same obsession when I would go into nightclubs and honky-tonks. And it was these men that were so exciting. And always the forbidden fruit seemed to be the one I was attracted to. Always that bad boy, the one you knew you really shouldn't want, the one you knew your mother would hate. God, don't you love him? I mean, can anything be better than getting one mama hates, for God's sake? If my mother liked him, it was a kiss of death. Relationship over that day. Couldn't handle that. And then, mental unfaithfulness. Thinking about somebody else instead of who you got. Mental unfaithfulness. We don't think a lot about that. But that's where you start and you make these little plan that affair in your head kind of thing, Bet it would be really nice to go out with him, and I bet it would be better. And you see, your fantasy person is always going to be better than what you got, because what you got's real. Fantasy is just that. It's fantasy. It's not real. But in your mind, it becomes real to you. And that's where you begin to plan that affair, and comparing what you have with what you perceive the other thing is going to be. And it is a disease of perception that we seem to have. And then there was avoidance. Being unavailable emotionally and physically. Blocking somebody out. The opposite of love is not hate. It's indifference. Don't care. Just don't care. There's nothing worse than somebody just doesn't care. I've been the person that's received it, and I've been the person that's done that. And then I was a controller, and when I came in the program, I told my sponsor, I said, "Well, I'm not a controller and a manager in the bedroom." And JD got hysterical on that. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You decide when we're going to, how we're going to, if the lights are on, if the lights are off, if it's under the covers, if it's this." And I'm going, "Is that controlling?" I never realized that. You can take the tone of what's going on in the bedroom, and that'll be the same tone as what's going on in the relationship. If there's a lot of cold indifference and what have you there, that's going to be sort of the tone of the relationship. And I also, I believed in the dog yummy sex. If you're a good dog, you get some. If you're a bad dog, you don't get one. That was it. Then there was abuse, physical and verbal. You hurt me or you do something that really upsets me, I'll get you for that. I might not say it, but I'll get you for that. It was one of those things. I like slow, premeditated revenge. And, if you wait long enough, every dog has her day. You just wait. And then using excuses instead of taking responsibility for my actions. If he was a better husband, I wouldn't have to do this. If he was a better provider, I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to be going without over here. If this was this way, then that would be that way. And that begins, all these things are going into place. These are all things that are killing any hope that that relationship was ever going to have. And then the disease of more. No matter what I have, I always want more. I'm never satisfied. It's like if I get this, I'll be okay and everything will be wonderful. And then you get that and guess what? It's not. And then you go to the next thing. And when I have that, when I do this, when I do that. And there's never going to be enough if you have the disease of more. Alcoholics have the disease of more. There's this alcoholic walk in the bar and there's a big sign that says, "All you can drink for $1. And he says, "Give me $2 worth." Yeah. See, there's never enough for them either. You know, that's the reason we're so much alike. I don't know about you, but other than having an allergy to alcohol, I don't know what the difference between me and an alcoholic is. Because I have the same obsessions, I have the same compulsions, I have the same disease of insecurity and the same immaturity and what have you. It's all right there in place, you know. Some of my friends in AA tell me I'm just a six-pack short, but it just doesn't do for me. You know, it doesn't make me 6 foot tall, blonde, and gorgeous. I'm sorry. You know, I love it when they talk about it. I have a friend out in California, and she says, you know, when I drank, I became tall and blonde and gorgeous. The only problem was if I drank too much, my pants fell off. You know, I didn't have to drink for that. You know, if you're really honest about it, we do things cold sober that alcoholics would never dream about doing drunk. You know, alcoholics say, well, I got thrown in jail. Well, I got thrown in jail and I wasn't drunk. I was drunk on emotion. I wasn't drunk on alcohol, but I was drunk on emotion. You know, that kind of. Okay, and then there's the fantasy that I live in. Denial ruins reality for you, you know. I mean, it just, you're not there. You're not, and you've got to learn to be where your hands are. Right here, right now. This is where we are right now. You know, there's a story, you know, about denial. And there was a rabbi and a priest and an al-anon. They all died and went to hell. And they were discussing this. And so the rabbi and the priest were sitting there, and the priest says, what did you do to get sent to hell? And the rabbi said, it was pork. When I was a kid, next door neighbor had pork chops for supper one night, invited me over. I didn't know, and I ate pork. I got the taste of pork. And you know we're not supposed to have pork. That's probably why I'm here. Why are you here? He said, well, it's sort of the same thing. It was the next door neighbor's daughter. Just never could get a grasp on that celibacy thing. And they looked at the al-anon and they said, and why are you here? And she said, what? And they said, what did you do to get sent to hell? And she said, it's not hot and I'm not here. When you're spiritually bankrupt, this will kill your relationship. And you make bad choices and you do bad things. And then one of the things that my mother did, which I hated the most, was her constant bitching about stuff. You know, my mother's motto, and it later, you know, I look in the mirror one day and I become my mother, is why say in 25 words what you can harp on for 6 weeks? You know, and there's a story about that too. There was this little nun, and she went in the convent and took a vow of silence. And after 10 years, they came to her and they said, Sister, Mother Superior wants to see you. And she said, you've been good and faithful nun. We're going to allow you 2 words. You can say 2 words. And she said, food's bad. She said, that's right. The food here is not the greatest food in the world. Go back and pray. Another 10 years went by, and they called her in to see Mother Superior. And she said, we're going to allow you to have 2 more words. And she said, bed's hard. She said, that's true. The beds are hard here. Go back and pray. 10 years pass. They bring her back in. Mother Superior says, we're going to give you 2 more words. I quit. She said, thank God, you've been nothing but bitch since you've been here. The book talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, and self-seeking. And what are the differences there? Selfishness is what I want. It's more. It's me. It's mine. Self-centeredness says it's all about me. And self-seeking is what's in it for me. Those are 3 different kinds of selfishness. Now, I told you what killed our relationship. Well, I'm going to tell you now what healed our relationship. One of the first things was learning to have a sense of humor and not taking ourselves so damn seriously. Rule 62. Learn to laugh at yourself. We are the funniest people in the world. We really are, if you just look at us, you know. You know, I remember the first time I was able to use a sense of humor in a situation. Seemed like the holidays were always difficult because there's so many bad memories from bad times and things happening over the holidays. And so I made a decision one morning. I got up and I did my prayer and I said, God, help me today not to let anything ruin my day today. Let me have a sense of humor. Because believe it or not, when I got here, I had no sense of humor. And so we went out to see my mother-in-law, and who wasn't home, as it turned out. And JD had asked me if I would drive because he was tired that night. So I drove the pickup, and it had been raining. And so we get into his mother's driveway. It's a real long driveway, about the length of this room. And she wasn't there, so now we have to come back out the driveway. You got to back up. I told you I'm not great at backing up. And I got off of the driveway, and when I did, that back axle on the left-hand side sunk in the mud where it had rained and the ground was soft. Well, there we are. Well, he called me everything but a human being. Now, what would be my normal? Smack him or more. And instead, I got out of the car and I looked at it and I said, well, I'll be damned. It's still in the mud. That didn't help. Would you like to do something constructive like call a wrecker? And he looked at it and he laughed. He said, I guess that didn't help anything. Because you know, sometimes when somebody screws up, the kindest thing you can do is keep your mouth shut. You know, and still we like to go, you know, put them down. So that was a beginning, you know. One night, it was on the 4th of July, and I had gone to a meeting. A tornado came through while I was at the meeting. Y'all have those too down here, so you know of what I speak. And you'd be surprised up north, they go, oh. You know, they don't even know where yonder is, for God's sake. A foreign land north of the Mason-Dixon, I'll tell you. Anyway, and so while we were in the building, during the meeting, all of a sudden the curtains began to blow out straight from the windows and stuff, and the thunder and lightning, and we could hear the sirens, so we all got under the tables. And after it was over, there were power lines down and trees and a lot of debris out in the street. So, I mean, you knew it was close by or whatever, it had come through. And so I'm driving home, and I'm only 6 blocks away from the meeting. And as I'm pulling down my street, there's no lights or anything, but I do notice as I turn my headlights toward my house to turn in, that our tree in the front yard is now in the living room. And JD is out there in the yard, you know. Well, naturally, he's scared, you know. And so he says, where the hell have you been? He said, you're over there at that meeting. That meeting is so important. It's so important. I'm over here. I'm fighting a tree in the living room. And you're at the meeting. And you're just having this wonderful time. I'm here. He's just going off, you know. And I said, you're right. I said, I turned to Jennifer and I said, you know, I bet there's a tree in our living room. And JD's hysterical. Ha, 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 ha. And he looked at me and I said, do you really think that happened? And he said, well, you just don't understand. I said, well, yes, I do. And he said, how could you understand? I said, well, you're forcing me. Do you remember that day that you were going to cut the willow tree in the backyard? And you started in the middle of the tree with the chainsaw and it got stuck. And you went to the bar to think about it. And the storm that came through that knocked down the willow tree, the saw, and it crashed into the gas light, and it crashed into the kitchen that I was standing in at the time. I do know how that feels to have a tree come through on you. Well, if you must drag up the past. I do know of what I speak, you know. I told him, I said, well, what do you think we ought to do here? And he says, well, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, I think we ought to see about putting some Visqueen over that hole and getting that tree out of the house. You know, it's like having the fit here and all like that now is not going to change anything. What do you think we ought to do? One thing I know about JD, and it's just the way JD is, in a crisis, I can usually hold it together and then fall apart later. JD falls apart during the crisis. I mean, that's his thing, and that's the way it is, and I just accept that's the way it is. But he has lots and lots of good qualities. Another thing that helped heal our relationship was a sincere amends. When you're wrong, be sincere, admit it, and it's okay to be wrong. Because when you can be wrong, that frees you, believe it or not. It frees you. You can make mistakes now because it's okay to be wrong. All people make mistakes. It's not a life or death thing here. And you've got to be able to forgive. And what is forgiveness? Anything but just giving somebody another chance. It's not a big deal. Put the past in the past and leave it there. Make a living amends by not bringing it up anymore. Quit beating somebody. No matter, God can't change the past. How can somebody else change it? You know, it's like, I did it. I'm sorry. If I could do it over again, I would do it differently, but I can't go back and undo that. It's like you back over somebody with a car, you roll forward. That doesn't help them much. You can't undo what's been done. Just try to go from that point now and put the past in the past. And then one of the things that has really helped our relationship has been the fact that we pray together. We pray together because where two or more are joined, God is there. You know, where two or more are joined, God is there. And the first thing that we ever prayed on, it was a real simple thing. We were very young in the program. The state convention was coming up. JD got sober. JD got fired, lost his job. 6 months, I had the whole financial responsibility, and it was very hard. And my sponsor said, "Are y'all going to go to the state convention?" And I said, "How in the hell can we go? Don't you know, JD?" And I went there, and she said, "Oh, it was a yes or no question." Why can't we say yes or no? We have to, do all this stuff. Anyway. And so she says, "Well, have you prayed about it?" No, because I wasn't in the habit of praying about things. And she says, "Well, why don't you see what God says?" And so I went home and I told JD what my sponsor said. And I said, "What does your sponsor say?" He says we ought to go to that convention. And I said, "Well, I don't know how we can afford to go because we're doing well to even pay most of the bills. There's some we're having to put back and pay others, swap them around, do all that juggling." And I said, "I just don't know how we're going to do that." And he said, "I don't know either." And I said, "But she said we could pray about it." I said, "Do you want to pray together?" He says, "Do I have to say anything?" I said, No, that's okay." And so we knelt by the side of the bed that night and we held hands. I said, "God, if it be your will, we'd like to go to the convention. Thank you very much." That was it. Pretty simple prayer, isn't it? Sincere prayer. Next morning I got up, I went to the office. We had a Watts line back then. I called down to Hot Springs, made the reservations. That was something I could do. 30 minutes later, JD called me. Now, he'd been looking for a job for 6 months. 30 minutes later, JD called me, he had a job. He's been on that same job 30 years. Same company. I want to tell you something else that's remarkable. This is a man who never worked more than 1 or 2 days a week when he was drinking. He has a perfect attendance, never late one day, 30-year record with his company. You know? You see, JD told God, he says, "I need a job. You give me a job and I will give an honest day's pay, or work for an honest day's pay. And I will be the kind of employee that you would want me to be." And I'd hate to tell how many people in that company they have sent to JD to talk to about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They said they love members of AA because they've seen JD as an example of sober living and what it means to be a sober employee. I'm real proud of him. We have healthy communication, respect, and courtesy. And I learned to work on that relationship instead of being lazy. I can be a very lazy person. I can be spiritually lazy. I can be physically lazy, and I can be emotionally lazy and not do my part. And I've learned that I have to quit doing those things and be accountable, suit up and show up. And my spiritual condition in my relationship, will be contingent on what my personal condition is and what JD's is. Because like I say, we can't bring to the relationship what we don't have. And if I'm in a bad place, I say to him, JD, right now I don't feel real connected or whatever. And you know, when I don't have a lot, that's when I have to pull back and work on my own program of recovery, because I don't have too much to give to the relationship. And I just tell him this is where it is for right now. So, you know, let's not have a bunch of serious demands or discussions or anything right now if we can possibly help it, because I'm really not in a good place. And he can do the same. And we don't try to fix one another. You know, I get tickled sometimes. It's like, of course, we've been together a number of years, but he will come home from work and nothing's right. You ever have that deal? They come in and then, what are you going to have for supper? Well, I don't want that. Okay. And then what are you going to be? Well, I don't want that. And then the dog looks at him wrong or something, you know. And then, you know, I've learned just to shut up and don't go there. You know, our normal thing is, honey, what's the matter? Tell me all about it. Let me fix it for you, you know. I don't do that anymore. And then sometimes later during the evening I'll say, would you like to talk about what's really bothering you? Because I know it's none of those things that he's picked on. It's something that's a lot deeper than that he's having problems dealing with. And when I approach it that way, he'll usually say, so-and-so at the job, or something's going on here or that. And he's got 2 brothers that are still out there actively practicing their diseases. And that, a lot of times, you know, his al-anonism sometimes just amazes me. You know, his brother, who is 75, got arrested for shooting up the trailer park. And so he was ordered to go to AA. He was ordered into treatment. He was there 2 days, let himself out until his daughter, who's an attorney, explained to him that he would go straight to jail, or he better go back to the treatment center. And so he went back to the treatment center, and of course she's fixed it for him, you know, with the judge on that shooting up thing. But anyway, so JD, he said, I'll take him to AA and I'll introduce him to everybody out there in his area, you know, and that was the end of that. And JD was really hopeful that this would be the thing, you know, and you have to stand back, and it's like, I couldn't see that being enough for him to go to AA, knowing his brother. But JD, hope springs eternal, and he wants it so bad for his brother. And so I saw him getting irritable and whatever, and I knew he was upset about his brother. So sometimes it's just that, and all I can do when he's like that is pray for him. It's don't try to confront him, don't try to fix it, don't try to wheedle out. When he's ready to talk about it, he'll talk about it. Because don't you sometimes want to get it all together before you discuss it? And it's always better if he discusses it with somebody, his sponsor or someone else in AA, before we talk about it anyway. I learned early on, you know, call my sponsor and cool down past kill. Because I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it now. You know, but that's when I sure don't need to talk about it, because I've got all that power driven in me because I'm afraid. And that's what he is. He's afraid for his brothers. So I would ask y'all, if y'all will, tonight when you go to bed, if you'll just say a small prayer for JD's 2 brothers, CD and John. Those are his 2 brothers still active. And we'll start again in the morning. Okay.
Okay, everybody. Thank you.
I tell you what, I was at the Alabama, Florida, North Florida conference a couple of years ago, and they had the most unique way of doing the cell phone announcement. They made the announcement, and within less than 30 seconds, a phone rang. And so they went tearing down the aisle, they grabbed the cell phone, brought it up front, took a ball-peen hammer, and beat it to bits. And I said, I like that, you know. I love action. You know, it's a program of action. I love action. Good morning. My name is Mary Pearl. I'm still an al-anon who's happy, joyous, and free. And I want you to know, on my time, this is very early. I'm out of my time zone here. And I'm more of a night person than a morning person, so we might get off rocky. We never know. I want you to... Is this wonderful or what? This was given to me. I can't wait to get home and out-remote him. I really can't. And see, people who are not here will hear this on the CD and go, what the hell is she talking about? And we won't tell them. You know, that's like my sponsor used to say. I'd say to her, well, what happened at the meeting? And if I missed a meeting, and she'd say, well, what do you mean, what happened? I said, well, what was it? She says, well, I got what I was supposed to get. We'll never know what you missed. So you can't afford to miss a meeting, for God's sake. You know, you'll miss something. Because isn't it amazing, no matter what you go for, and no matter what your need is or whatever, everybody's need is met when you go to the meeting, because everybody gets something different out of it. You know, it's amazing to me when people I sponsor say, my sponsor said, and I'm thinking, I never said that in my life. Wonder where they heard that. And if it's good, I say, thank you. If I don't like it, I'll say, you're crazy. Okay, we're at tradition 4. Each partner should be autonomous, except in matters affecting the other partner, the family or relationship, or society as a whole. Well, now we learn what autonomy means here. It means I have the freedom to do anything I want to do when I want to do it. However, I have to take responsibility for whatever action I take. And I've always wanted a free shot. I don't know about y'all, but when I was a kid, I can remember wanting to do stuff I wasn't supposed to do and not have to take the fall for it, you know. Because when they confront you, what do? Lie. You know, what happened here? I don't know. I remember my nephew, my brother was killed in Korea, and his son came to live with us for a while. And he was afraid to stay by himself. So my mother said, that's okay, you can sleep with Mary Pearl. And I'm thinking, I don't like that. I've never slept with anybody in my life. And this kid, he was a flouncer, you know. And I'm only 4 years older than my nephew. And so he would lay there in the arm and a leg and what have you. But I learned early on, he was scary. You know, he was a spooky kid. And so I'd say, let's watch The Late Show. It was the late night, fright night, you know. And of course, in those days, the horror movies were Dracula and the werewolf, you know, nothing like Chainsaw Massacre or Halloween 14, you know. I mean, it wasn't anything like that. But we'd get in there in the bed and he would not be resting well. And we had big high beds, and I would scoot down and get under the bed and come back over on his side. And you know how you'll lay there, but when somebody's staring at you, you know how you'll open your eyes? And when he'd open his eyes, I'd go, ah! And he would scream bloody murder, and Mother would say, what are y'all doing? And we'd both say together, nothing. Never want to take a responsibility for anything you're doing. You know. I love terrorizing him. He would. You know, I really hate it when people are too easy. You know, that just really brings out the worst in me, because it's like they're begging to be done. You know, I was at a conference in Montana, and this other speaker had brought her boyfriend with her, and he was from Los Angeles. I don't think he'd ever been out of Los Angeles, ever. And, you know, he was very good looking. He thought he looked like Peter Fonda. And he was prissing around. He just thought he was God's gift to women. And we were up in Glacier National Park, and we were looking at these giant mountain goats. You know, those are big dudes, you know, but they just go, dip, 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 and they just jump up from ledge to ledge like they were just feathers. You know, it's amazing. And so he says, wonder if they've ever fallen. And I said, you see those marks on the rocks coming down? I said, that's where they were going, eee! And he said, really? I mean, I can't play with him. He's too dumb. I just can't do that. It brings out the worst in me. Okay, so much for all that. In autonomy, before I take an action, I have to ask myself a few things, you know. I don't ask myself, is this going to make JD mad? I don't ask him that, because JD has a choice whether JD gets mad or not, you know. What I ask myself is it the right thing I'm thinking about doing? And sometimes, you know, I can justify anything, so I run it past somebody who is out of the picture. Have you ever noticed if you're in the picture, you can't see the picture? You know, so you get somebody that's looking in, that's not you, which is usually my sponsor. And I talk to my sponsor about things when I'm thinking of taking some kind of action that I wonder about. You know, I know what I'm not supposed to be doing in life. I know the things I shouldn't do. It's just I don't always know what I should do, you know, so I run this past her. Now, I've learned a long time ago, the mind is a dangerous neighborhood. Don't go in alone. You know, always run it past somebody else. You know, when my mind gets involved in something, it never stops. I don't know about you, but my mind is constantly going. It's constantly talking to me, and it's not always my best friend. Now, years ago, when I was married the first time, my husband took me away from home. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be away from home more than anything in the world. And he was in the military, and he said, marry me and we'll see the world. And we went to Newfoundland. Wasn't on my list of places to go see. Anybody here from Newfoundland? We'll pray for you. It's the last outpost of humanity, you know. And if it's not, you can see it from there. I mean, you know, it was just out there. Snow 9 months of the year. Yeah, don't you down here in the South, don't y'all love that? Well, I lived in a place called Hillview, and that's because there was a mountain right in front of my house. And in the wintertime, which was 9 months of the year, you never drove down to your house. You parked up on the road. Because if you got down, you were likely not going to get back up the hill. And on the other side of that hill was this mountain. And now, from my front door, there was like 18 or 20 steps cut in the ice to go up to the top of the road to get to that car. And so I'm sitting there one day and I'm thinking, you know, at home, just like y'all, if you want a Christmas tree, what do? You go down to the Optimist Club lot or the Kiwanis or whoever's selling Christmas trees. They import them in from over in the Northwest. And you get one out of Washington or Oregon, you know, one of those nice little trees. But I'm in the land of Christmas trees. We did not have trees that had leaves. They're all evergreens up in that kind of climate. And so I'm thinking, oh God, I'll get to go and cut my first Christmas tree. I'll get to decorate it with popcorn and cranberry chains, and I'll get the real feeling of Christmas, like I've never had Christmas, you know. But to me, see, everything's always a big deal. I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting hot in here. What happened to our air?
Got it down to 70.
Is it only at 70? A woman in menopause needs at least 50. Get back there and turn that damn thing down. Because if I have to go further than this, we're all in trouble here. And I'm old. Don't think I won't. You know, I can do anything, get away with it. Now I'm old. Anyway, I lived in an apartment complex, and I lived on the end. My landlady lived in the middle, and the Newfoundlander couple lived on the other end. And this landlady had two sons. They were like 14 and 16 years old, and they had a toboggan. Now, how many people here are familiar with a toboggan? Well, see, there's some who aren't. And a toboggan is a flat board with a curl on the end of it. It is not a sled. It does not have runners on the bottom. It's just a flat board. This nice long board, but it was flat. And now I had never seen one of those before because, see, I'm from Arkansas, and we don't have a lot of snow there. You know, I have a sled. I still have my original sled. I've used it probably 3 times in 64 years. So, you know, I mean, it's not like we have a bunch of snow. But I know everything about everything. At least I think I do, you know. And so I get Danny and Paul, and I get my husband, and we go up the mountain. And what the plan is that we're going to cut down a Christmas tree. We're going to tie it on the toboggan, and we're going to bring it back home, and we're going to decorate it with that popcorn and cranberry chain. Now, see, there's the plan. Now you get up there and you cut down your tree. Well, it's something that happens to them when you cut them down. They don't look as good as they did while they were standing up. Now, if you're going to have this experience, we all know it has to be the perfect experience. So you cut down another tree, because this one doesn't look good enough anymore. And then you cut down the next tree, and the next tree. And then finally you recognize the perfect shaped Christmas tree is the top of the big tree. So we cut down the top of the big tree. Now I have all these trees littering the landscape up there on the mountain. And I decided I'll take all these trees and tie them on and take them back down to everybody in the apartment complex who has not asked me to get them a tree. Ever helpful. Thank you so much. Ever helpful. So here we are, and we tie all the trees on, and now the plan was okay up to this point. But you see, I keep thinking, and my mind says, wouldn't it be fun if we rode down on top of the trees? And I've got this piece of rope, and I can tie me on. That way I won't possibly fall off. Now, I've always had people around me that follow directions. And if you act like you know what you're doing, people will follow you. It's amazing. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. So anyway, so I get on the front and they get on behind me and we push off and down the hill we go. Well, there's something happens. I gained some extra information I didn't have a moment ago, but I can't do a thing with it. And that is, going downhill, you gain lots of speed. There's no brakes on a toboggan. There's no steering mechanism on a toboggan. You're on for the ride, And so we're coming down the hill and we go over some smaller trees. And they get thrown off. But not me, because I'm tied on. And I'm coming down, and as I'm coming on that road, there's cars going back and forth on that road. And it's like, and I go shooting right between two cars and bip, bip, bip down those ice steps and wham, right through the bottom of my house. Thank God they don't have brick homes, I'd be another speaker here today. But I hit that thing, it splintered me, the toboggans. I had needles driven into my flesh. I mean, this was a horrible thing. And I'm laying there, and my landlady comes running out. She doesn't know if a plane has crashed into the house. I mean, that makes quite a jolt in your apartment complex when you knock a hole the size of, like that in the bottom. And she says, "What are you after doing, you crazy Yankee bitch?" And I looked up at her and I said, "Don't call me no Yankee." I may be dying, but don't call me no Yankee. No, the reason I tell you that you can do anything if you act like you're doing, this is something I learned in my 11th grade civics class. The teacher made that observation, She said, if you really act like you know what you're doing, that you can, really probably get away with a lot of stuff. And I thought, I'll use that as my experiment. And so I got a clipboard, a pickup truck, and two guys off the football team, and we went down to a local diner. And we walked in, and I start reading off numbers, and they're looking under tables, and one of them says, "This is it." I said, "Fine, take it." So he picked it up, we put it in the back of the truck and drove off. Nobody questioned us. At that moment. The police later questioned us. Seems they call that theft. No sense of humor. They did not laugh, But, it's like those kind of things stick in my mind. See, that's what happens when I get to thinking. And so when I'm sponsoring someone and they say, "I've been thinking," I get cold chills. I don't know about y'all. Because when you think like I think, it's just plumb scary. And when your thinking is broken, try not to use it quite so much. That's the reason it's so nice to have a sponsor. That's the tour guide of my life. The person who's been there, done that, and can tell me what to look out for, what to watch for, what not to do, whatever. And then I do whatever I want to do. She gives me choices, you know. And if I don't if she tells me, I really don't think you ought to do that, and then I go ahead and do it, you know, I mean, she can't make me do anything, and she can't keep me from doing anything. You know, I always love it when people say, my sponsor made me do it, and I'm thinking, no, your sponsor probably suggested, told you, or whatever, but the bottom line is nobody can make you do anything. You have choices. And I have to accept the consequences of my choices, and that's what being autonomous is all about. I always have a choice. During the year of the dry drunk, after JD quit drinking without the benefit of Alcoholics Anonymous, that was when I got very, very sick from my thinking. My thinking is, you know, he's drinking and that's our problem. He quit drinking. I still had a problem. How can that be? You know, what's going on? You know, the only thing that was the matter was his drinking. And now he's not drinking, so how can there still be stuff going on here? You know, why do I still hate him? You know, and why can't we get along? I mean, we have major war every day, and it's just as simple as, what do you want for supper? I don't care. What do you want for supper? I don't care. What do you want for supper? Anything. Well, would you like fried chicken? No, I don't want fried chicken. Well, you said you wanted anything. Well, I don't want fried chicken. Well, how about spaghetti? You know, I don't want spaghetti. You make the world's worst spaghetti. Thank you for sharing. Well, what do you want? Anything. So I fix anything. And he looks at it and he says, you don't expect me to eat that, do you? And I say, well, you have a choice. You can eat it or you can wear it. Sometimes he ate it. Sometimes he wore it. It wasn't a happy time in our home, you know. Every day there was a war about something. It didn't make any difference, you know. It's amazing to me when I think about my solutions compared to a sane person's solutions. You know, one of our major concerns was toothpaste. I don't know if toothpaste seems to be anything in your home, but JD squeezes the toothpaste in the middle of the tube. No one should ever squeeze toothpaste from the middle of the tube. You squeeze it from the bottom up. Anybody knows that, you know. And so I would have to instruct him every morning on how not to do the toothpaste. And then he would do it in the middle just for the meanness of it after I'd already given him the toothpaste lesson. It was not a happy time in our house. You see, my sponsor solved this problem for me in one conversation. Buy 2 tubes. I would never have thought of that. You know why? Because you're going to do it my way. The thought that you could do it one way and I could do it another way would never enter my mind, because my way is the only way. There was my thinking. And so here it is, you know, like I say, we're fighting on a daily basis, and that's when I began to get really, really emotionally sick. Now, I want to tell you something. Most people, when they're getting nutty as a fruitcake, don't know it. People who are totally nuts don't know it. They think everybody else is nuts, you know. That's part of the disease. It says you don't have it. They're the ones that's got it. You know, and that's just like the disease of alcoholism. It tells the alcoholic, you don't have a problem with alcohol. Alcohol is your solution. You see, they have the same kind of insanity going on. And my thing is, alcohol is the problem. And alcohol was not the problem. The problem was alcoholism. The disease of self-centeredness, I, self, me, the ism. And I had it as well as the alcoholic. I just didn't drink. But I got crazier. I got crazier, and he got crazier when he wasn't drinking. And see, that is so hard for your mind to grasp. And so I'm thinking, well, the problem is not his drinking, the problem is him. It's just him. So I got to thinking. And I didn't realize it, but that was the summer the committee moved in. You know, you get to talking, and you get to thinking, and you talk to yourself, and you answer yourself, and you argue with yourself. And pretty soon there's a whole lot of Mary Pearls out here, and we're all thinking. I am so miserable. God, isn't that the truth? What are we going to do? I don't know. Why don't we get a divorce? Well, you can't get a divorce. Why can't I get a divorce? Well, you've already divorced one. If you have to keep divorcing people, what's the common denominator? We're not going there. Shut up. You don't need to be a divorcee, but you could be a widow. What? I want to hear more. Well, if you were a widow, that's more honorable than having to be a divorcee all over again. Boy, you got that. But he's not dying. We can take care of that. Oh! Well, what do you want to do? Well, let's see. Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to take an ice pick, stab him in the neck, and watch him drip. Ooh, does that make you feel good? Or we can back over him with the tires, on the car and just squish him up in the tread. Make a note, buy new tires, deeper tread. I begin to feel better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Now, as crazy as that seems, do you see the need to have to tell somebody what you're thinking? Because if you don't, you're liable to act on that. You see, if I had said it out loud to another person, there's the slight possibility I might have said, ooh, I'm a little off center. Most certainly somebody would have said, you're a nut. But I didn't have that. And so that's what happened when my thinking gets out of whack, And so I read in the paper where a woman in Pine Bluff, which is a town south of Little Rock, had killed her husband, said he was an alcoholic, used that as her reason for killing him. Sounded good to me. And they still put her in prison. And I thought, tacky. If I'd have been on that jury, that wouldn't have happened. Not in a million years. Justifiable homicide is what that is. And I thought, okay, we've got to have another committee meeting here. So you get back to thinking again, because see, that got me to thinking I don't want to go to prison. See, what is this? I have the responsibility for whatever action I take, and I wasn't wanting to have that responsibility. So how do you get around it? Well, now you have to make it look like an accident, don't you? You've got to fix it. And so we all got to thinking in the fall of that year, and it came to us one night, if an alcoholic were to pass out in the bathtub and drown, who would know? We all liked it. It was a group conscience. So now all you have to do is just wait, because sooner or later he always drinks again. Sooner or later he always drinks. And sure enough, a year to the week that he had gone to the doctor and taken antabuse, he got drunk. And when he came in that day, we had ice and snow one more time in Arkansas. And I heard our truck coming down the road. You know how you know the sound of your own vehicle? Because God knows you've listened for it enough. You know everything. It sounded like he was doing about 60 in second gear. He came down the street, and when he started to turn in the driveway, didn't quite make the turn on the ice. He went across the yard. He clipped off our hitching post horse at the end of the driveway, which was cast iron and concrete. He went slinging across the yard. He hit the big redbud tree in the front yard, and then he bounced into the side of the house. I thought, he really can't drive on ice and snow, can he? But he opened that truck door and he poured out. How many times have you seen that drunken disembarkation from the car, or their stomach? And And I'm looking out that front window and I say, I'll kill that SOB if it's the last thing I ever do. Because he was the problem. And so then I put my plan into effect. He came through the door. I never said a word to him. I hit him as hard as I could. And when he fell, he hit the edge of the coffee table with his head, and it knocked him out. And I drug him across the living room, down the hall, into the bathroom. Took his clothes off of him, filled the bathtub full of warm water. Put him in the bathtub and held him under. Held him under until all the bubbles quit coming. And then there's another voice, and this voice says, look at what you're doing. This is not one of the committee. It's a different voice. Look what you're doing. You can't do this. And I picked him up by the hair of the head, and I said, the hell I can't. And I put him back down again. Now, if you're having these kind of things and you're talking to voices and stuff, there's something very wrong with you. And the voice came back and it says, don't you realize you're committing murder? You're taking the life of someone you once loved. And let me tell you something. It's a moment of clarity in which you see yourself that you have become an animal to fight an illness, and it scared me to death. If you had told me that I was capable of plotting premeditated murder for months, I would have told you you were crazy. You see, I didn't realize what I was doing. I was so nuts. And so it scared me to death. I jerked him up out of that bathtub, and thank God, while I lived in Newfoundland, I worked for the Red Cross, and I learned how to resuscitate people. You see, God always gives you what you need in any situation. He went ahead and he planned in love for J.D. and for me. And it's only by the grace of God that I'm not in prison somewhere and J.D.'s not dead. You know? Those are the kind of things. That's the reason it's so important to run that thinking past somebody else. Because if you don't run your thinking, you may not be as extreme as me, but how many people have died the silent death and the death of the relationship at home? And sometimes living in this myth is like a living death instead of actually, you know, you take away any kind of joy from somebody. You know, you can kill a person many ways. You can break their spirit. You can belittle them long enough until they have nothing left of self-esteem. You can kill people in many ways. To be autonomous, you have to know who you are. Who are you? When you describe yourself, who are you? You've got to be more than just a woman, a wife, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a worker, a friend. You've got to be more than that. What is the one thing that we all have in common?